You can help us save small business owners time and money by donating at https://cabinetshr.co/crowdfunding. Our guest today is Ira Wolf. Ira, are you ready to be great today?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Jason.
Ira S. Wolf is a millennial trapped in a baby boomer body and president of Poised for the Future company, founder of Success Performance Solutions, a TEDx speaker, top five global thought leader on future work and HR, author of Recruiting in the Age of Googlization, and host of the Geeks Geezers Googlization podcast. Ira, thank you for being here today. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks very much, Jason. I've been anticipating this quite a bit. Love the conversation, and congrats on your crowdsource launch.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's just a lot to do, right? Hopefully it pays off for me, right? Because it is a lot of work, you know.
Yeah, it sure is a lot of work. So I applaud you for doing that, and congratulations, and wish you the best of success.
Thank you. So, Ira, you have a lot going on. What are you focused on right now?
You're right. I have a lot going on. So, we're living in this in crazy times, and I'm very grateful. If you and I were talking 12 months ago in the beginning of March, we certainly didn't know we didn't think we were going through a complete shutdown, although that was being threatened. But despite that, especially being the HR business, we provide pre-employment and leadership testing to companies. I've been around for a while. That's the baby boomer part. So I do have that under my belt. And my immediate thoughts were 2001, 2008, a crisis. People stopped hiring. People start not only laying off, but they stopped hiring. They stopped promoting. They were more worried about how do we keep the doors open, and and then the doors were slammed shut for so many businesses. And I fully expected that I would be, my business would slow down radically, and never lost a step. We've been busier than ever, which is a good sign for everybody else that's out there. And we can talk about that a little bit as well, about the economy, the future of work. There's certainly, I didn't have a lot of clients in hospitality, entertainment, transport, and travel. So that didn't affect me a whole lot. But on the other aspect is the only reason I'm busy is because other people are busy hiring people. And that's a good thing. So I've had an incredibly busy year, and I'm very fortunate, and it's been good. But I think that's the sign of things to come. It's also going to make it much more difficult it's going to be good for people who have skills from the job seeker side. People who have the skills are going to be in demand and have a lot of opportunities. Employers who were organizations that were struggling or are struggling to hire people, just the tip of the iceberg. And if you don't have your act together now, then it's not going to get better going forward. That's for sure. And hopefully we'll talk about some of those things and what we can do.
So Ira, here's a question for you. Let's suppose, the vaccine is 100% cured, COVID goes away, at least in manageable, right? So what's going to happen when this occurs? Company's going to say, hey, employees, come back to work, come back to your cubicle 9 to 5, drive 2 hours a day back and forth. And the employee's going to be like, wait a minute, I've already proven I can, do as well at home, if not produce more at home. You want me to go back to old ways? That's not going to happen, right? I think that's going to be interesting dynamic. What's your take on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, just the concept of let's get back to normal is the craziest. It's an insane idea. We've never gone back. And going back to what? To January of 2020, it was good for some people, but it wasn't good for a lot of people. And you look at all the conversations, the controversy going on now, with DEI, diversity and equity, gender pay, racial pay, racial inequalities. There were whole groups of people that nobody wants to go back to that. Certainly having some sense of normalcy, some routine, some predictability in our lives. We'd like to go back. We'd like to go socialize. So I think one is, I just want to get the message out that there is no such thing as going back to normal. We will have new normals, but those normals are going to be waves of normal. A good friend of mine talks about we're going to have multiple futures, and they're not going to necessarily be linear. It's not going to be, well, this is what the next 5 years looks like, and then the next 5 years and the following 5 years. We're going to have multiple futures going on simultaneously. So within that vein is, what does it look like when you go back to work? There are people, everybody has their different percentages, but it's going to be pretty close to like a third, a third, a third. A third of the workforce is going to stay at home. And that's going to be fine for many people. And sometimes even within a single company, there are going to be workers that don't want to go back to that commute, that hour, 2 hour, 3 hour commute. They realized it was expensive. And now even if they're working those same hours, there's still a little bit more flexibility at home. They get time to spend with their families. And it's just not as exhausting to do the commute. So there's going to be a third that are full-time at home. There's going to be a third that do go back to the office. And we'll talk about what the office looks like, but there's going to be a third that goes back to the office. And there's going to be a third in between that. The latest numbers I've seen is that it's going to be 2 days on site, 3 days at home, or vice versa. So somewhere in that, half the time people will work at home and work remote. Now, that brings up a really interesting question. So if you were 100% going to work in a physical building, in a headquarters, in an office before, and now there's a group of people that works remote. Well, that's fine and dandy. But what does the team look like? What if they're located now? The opportunity is you can hire people from anywhere because you can work remote. So it may not be, hey, we're having a meeting Friday, come on in, because you may be located in Seattle, I'm in Pennsylvania. And that's a big commute to be able to do that. But even the people who work 2 or 3 days, there's companies that are cutting down the space. So maybe you can't even accommodate everybody there. So when you decide to have a meeting, some of those meetings are not always going to be collectively. It's not going to be a physical meeting. It's still going to be a virtual meeting, because some people may be in the office and some people may be working remote. So I don't think companies have figured that out. I mean, when we talk about going back to normal, I don't think employees or the employers have really figured out what is the environment going to look like? What does the workspace look like? How do we handle meetings when not everybody is on site? And at least for a while, there's going to be some trepidation, even though people are going to have vaccines. Certainly all you need to do is walk into a crowded room and start coughing like we used to do. And people say, oh, I have a little cold, or my kid has a cold, and it's not really too bad. So, but all of a sudden people are going to take a different, a different anxiety level of what that's like. So it's going to take a while to get back to normalcy. But I think people are getting, like they have in certain states, the all clear, no restrictions anymore. Not everybody's jumping at that. It's not a switch. This isn't, people talk about the COVID as a war, and the impact has been similar to that. It's been devastating and loss of life. But there is no ceasefire. I mean, it doesn't end. The bombs don't stop dropping. We're going to have droplets in the air for a long time with variants. And so I think ultimately we'll have a third. But that creates a whole new set of, I won't say problems, but challenges and opportunity.
So let's suppose a company is in headquarters in Denver, Colorado. Let's say they have 10 people that work in Denver. Well, they have 20 people throughout the United States. Do you think the people in Denver have advantage of the remote workers, or the remote workers have advantage of their Denver employees, or how do you work through that, right? To make sure everything's fair and equitable, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a lot to unpack there, Jason. So we can talk about this for a while. So let's just talk, as far as pay. I mean, so there's a whole controversy going on right now, is that, well, we had people living in San Francisco and New York, and they had an increase. They paid people more, but now they're going to Colorado or Montana and South Dakota and other areas. They can come to Pennsylvania. They don't have that same high cost of living. Why do we have to pay employees the same way? Which gets into the whole controversy. Were you paying them because of where they lived and compensating them, giving them an adjustment on their geography, or was it because they were worth the performance? And there are many employees that are willing to take a cut to have a better lifestyle, well-being. They moved out of the city, and instead of having, a family of four that they were paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month to rent a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, they can buy a 2,500 square foot home with a yard for a third of that. Should they be penalized? Or the other flip side is many people say, hey, I'm willing to accept a 20%, 10% pay decrease because I have a better lifestyle. But companies are wrestling with that, and ultimately, though, it's going to depend on the culture. Is there a strategy to that, or is the strategy from a management side of what can we get away with? And from an employee side, from a worker side, is that how they're looking at it? Is my employer's cheap and they're trying to just get away with it, which isn't good for culture and engagement and experience and recruitment and all those other things. So it's the wild, wild west right now. There's a lot of discussion on it. There is a reason to pay less if people are working remote. The overhead also goes way down. Many organizations are closing some of their space. If they had multiple floors, they're eliminating some of the floors. So their overhead's going to go down. Does that go to the shareholders? Does that go to the owners? Or should that be distributed to employees? Maybe it should be a merit system that, hey, we have a couple $100,000 or a couple $1 million laying around now that we didn't have expenses that went out for rent and other things. How is that distributed? And maybe that becomes an incentive program. But it really ultimately is going to depend on the culture. And some companies are doing well, and some companies are screwing it up like they always did.
Yeah, I think the challenge is, from our reading, the companies who are getting it wrong, the ones don't communicate, right? They last minute say, we're going to cut you're moving to Montana, we're going to cut by 20%. Instead of communicating ahead of time much as they can, right? I think the companies get in trouble.
Yeah, and if that was never, you're absolutely right. It's communication. If that was never communicated from the beginning, the reason that we're paying you this much, or we're giving you a 20% bump or a 30% bump over what the average compensation is, it's because we want you here, and we understand that it's more expensive to live here. But if you move away, then we're not reducing your pay because you're not worth it. We're reducing your pay because the only reason you got paid $100,000 because that was a fair salary, and we paid you another $30,000 because we really wanted you here. But in order to live here, in order to force you to commute every day, we were willing to pay that. But if we don't have to force you to live within this geography, which is a higher living cost of living, then that goes away. But we don't think less of you. But I'm not sure that was ever communicated before. So there's definitely a PR issue that is going to happen. Plus, we've got a shortage of talent. There is a shortage of talent. So just because that skilled person used to live within a 25-mile commute and now they live 500 miles away, does that make them less valuable? And because companies are horrible at performance management. They don't track that. I just, again, got off the phone with the client, and they were asking me for metrics and what are other companies doing. And I said, it's really, really hard to get metrics. We're on the primarily on the pre-hire side. So a company has tests over 3 years, 50,000 people. I don't know who they hired. I don't know how well they perform. I said, can I get that data? And they go, well, what do other companies do? And I go, here's what I need from you. I need to know how many people you hired. I need to know who you hired. All I know is who you test, who you hired. And I need something as simple as ABC. A, we'd love to have 100 more people like them. B is, yeah, we'd hire them again, but there's room for improvement. And C is, we either terminated them or hope they quit. As simple as that. You don't have to dig down. It doesn't have to be a long, sophisticated performance evaluation. All we need is a rating from the manager, A, B, C. And they
So
go,
Ira,
we can't
so
get it.
yeah. So I'm a big believer that HR people should be should be business people. So this is kind of a slided question. Two-part question. From your point of view, what are business people getting wrong about what HR people should be doing for them? And what are HR people getting wrong about being business people?
Well, first of all, HR people need business acumen. You are part of the business. So from an HR perspective, is it the chicken or the egg? Is HR, and this is changing. So, and again, there's hundreds of thousands of people in the HR space. So it's always tough to stereotype. But as a rule, and I hear this over and over again, a lot of HR people say, I'm just not very good with numbers. I love working with people, or I'm really good with data. I'm good with compliance.
Yeah. When I heard that, it always makes me laugh.
Or I'm good at training. I'm good at interviewing, but they're not good with numbers. Well, you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be an actuary, but you need to be okay with numbers, at least the basics. And more important than just being good with the numbers, you have to understand how the numbers impact the business. So just be able to add columns doesn't mean much unless you can interpret the data. I always said that there are people that are really, really good at creating spreadsheets, but if you ask them to interpret it, to read between the lines, to find the white space, they can't do it. That's the critical skill. That's the business acumen, the level of let somebody else provide you the numbers in HR. If you're not good at calculating it, get the change, get the report, and then be able to look at the report and interpret that. So I think part of the challenge is HR has a responsibility to become better, have better acumen, become better analysts. On the flip side is companies have, notoriously not even given HR a seat at the table. They have not, respected their input. And so organizations need to, become much better at respecting HR, hiring people that have the skills that they need to have skills, and be able to, go that route. So it's going to take both people. It's going to take HR needs to become much better, much more skilled, go beyond the basic compliance and administrative tasks or just training tasks. And businesses are, again, it's not just saying, well, we include HR in our board meetings or in our critical meetings, our executive staff, is do they actually have a voice? And if they don't have the voice, is it because you don't have the right people? It's like, well, we'd give them the voice if we can trust the people. And that's a management problem. Get the people who have that, or recognize the people in there. So it's both. I think both parties are to blame.
Yeah, and I think a lot of businesses, like, they keep on hiring, like, I'll call the old top HR, like, the HR person only does hiring or manager, only does compliance, and they don't let an HR person add any value, right? They try to add more value, try to do more things. Like, that's not your lane, right? And then, of course, they keep on hiring the same old HR people, and the stereotype keeps on getting, reinforced.
Yeah, well, but we are going to need specialists. I mean, HR, it's like, oh, you're in HR, so we want you to be the trainer, our compensation and pay, our benefits. We want you to coach and mentor. We want you to be our EAP. We want you to do all these things. And people have different skill sets. I mean, some people are still going to be much better on the compliance, admin, financial analyst standpoint. And there's other people that are much more skilled and engaged and competent at mentoring and coaching and leading and training. It doesn't mean that it's exclusive. You can't just say, well, I'm in HR and I'm on the people side, therefore I'm because I'm not good with numbers, and vice versa. You're going to have to become much more versatile. Everybody is. I mean, everybody's going to have to upskill, and some people are going to have to completely reskill.
So, what's your take on this? And this is my opinion, what I've been observing. Like, seem like you're like mid-level, senior level HR person. You can just go from job to job, kind of easily, right? I mean, it's not easy, but hard. But people getting out of college or switching to HR careers, like it's impossible to find a job. I know like 7 people, 8 masters in HR, can't find a job, trying to entry level. They're taking like customer service stuff. What advice do you have these new HR people to try to break in, so to speak?
There's still a demand, and again, there may be some really competent individuals, and maybe they're in the wrong place. Maybe it's their presentation, maybe they're applying to the wrong companies. I mean, we're in an upheaval now. So, but the number of HR people who have moved around over the last year is incredible. I mean, every day my LinkedIn feed is this person's accepted a new role. They've got promoted. They have a new title. They're working with another company. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. So I'm going to throw back on some of the people. And again, it depends where you are. If you're if you're living in New York, in Manhattan, in the city, then yeah, maybe it is tougher to get an HR job because there's a lot of companies that have shut down. There's a lot of companies that are closed down. A lot of companies moved out. So that may be an indication. But there are other industries, there are other businesses, there are other areas they're literally thriving. And there's not a day goes by, as I said, that on a LinkedIn feed, I see one of my connections has moved. Multiple people have moved. There's also not a day that goes by that I don't get a request. Hey, if you know anybody looking, but it's the distribution. So I think if you're struggling to look, it may be taking a look at yourself. How do I reframe the resume? Maybe it's not just sending out the resume. What's some of your experience? If you're a recent grad and you don't have a lot of HR under your belt, you may have to bite the bullet and do an internship, or again, there's a lot of online courses. There's a lot of things you can do and build your skill set that way. But the demand for HR is huge. But again, companies are redefining what does HR mean? What does that role mean? And candidates are often saying, but I just paid $100,000 and got a degree in human resources, which didn't even exist when I went to school. But now they have that, so they are coming out better educated than just bringing somebody in as your receptionist, who you decide is going to do payroll, who decide is going to do your interviewing. That's how many HR people grew up. They started in a completely unrelated role and ended up evolving into HR. Now people can choose that as a profession, as a career, but experience does help as well.
Ira, from your point of view, what makes someone a great HR person?
Well, let's go back. One is I'll give you a very, very general answer. Because HR, you are responsible for the people, so human beings in your organization. So let's talk about, you are the leader of, even if that's not your title, you are a leader, you're an advocate for the employees within your company. And in order to do that, you have to at least be empathetic. You have to be able to walk in their shoes. And in most cases, HR are employees, so they should be able to do that a little bit. But on a general case, and this is one of the rabbit holes I've gone down over the last few years, one of my interests, which has become one of my passions, is talking about adaptability. And if you talk about what I believe HR should be responsible for going forward, is not just making sure that you have your I-9s in place, that people get paid. It is important that if they're supposed to get paid weekly or bi-weekly, that they get paid, that the systems work. If they have a problem, that you're there to help them. But beyond that is, people are fearful. I mean, people are anxious about the future. We live in one of my colleagues talks about that human beings are addicted to certainty. And we're all of a sudden we're going cold turkey because we went from an addiction to certainty, and all of a sudden, there is no more certainty. There is no more drug, and we're gonna be living in a state of perpetual uncertainty, and people are terrified of that. People are uncomfortable. They don't have the skill set. And so HR's responsibility is really going to be to help people become more comfortable with uncertainty. And that includes HR, because HR is not comfortable with uncertainty either. And we look at a couple different traits, and these are skills that you can identify within HR or help build. So is HR maybe the first place to do this, but then beyond that is they need to be able to mentor and coach other people. So we look at things like grit and resilience, and grit is how do you become, more, how do you continue to endure? And it's not no pain, no gain, but how do you continue to just keep moving forward one step at a time during a tough time? And then resilience is that ability to recover from a setback. But it doesn't advance you. I mean, the problem is resilience and grit just gets you back to where you were. It just allows you to plow ahead one day at a time, and you bounce back. But those are sometimes people don't have those skills. So HR needs to have is the ability to help create an environment that supports people during the most difficult times. Because no matter where you are on the scale of whether you're failing or whether you're thriving, there will be setbacks. But beyond that, it's helping people being that growth mindset, establishing a culture that we're going to make mistakes. Even the top leaders of all the companies, everybody's, a lot of different terms out there. We're flying the plane while we're building it. We're faking it till we make it. All those things are definitely in the past. If a CEO said, hey, I'm glad you're on for the ride, we're just faking it till we make it, I'm not sure a lot of people would apply or stay or not start looking to switch jobs. But the fact is that we all are. Everybody is. Nobody has the answers. Nobody knows for sure what's going to come down the pike. So having that growth mindset, being a little bit more forgiving, being a little bit more empathetic. I'm not saying tolerate mistakes, tolerate failure, but we're all in this together. And then the ability to unlearn bad things that worked in the past that just won't work in the future. Not only learning new things, we talked about learning, reskilling and upskilling, but part of that is not just piling on more information, but unlearning some of the bad behaviors that we had. I do an analogy of that is it's like defragging your hard drive. A couple months ago, I was getting all these errors, and my hard drive said your hard drive's filled, and I go, can't be. I've got like a terabyte of information, or a gigabyte of information, a terabyte of information. I looked, and I had like a couple, like 100 gigs of temporary files. I had every download of every image of every video that I had. And you clean it out. So you defrag it, you get rid of the stuff that you don't need, you get rid of the duplicates, you store them away, you put, they're there if I need to pull them out, but I don't need them on an everyday basis. And that's really what unlearning is. So the qualities of HR, I think overall is need to become much more empathetic and show it. People can be empathetic and not show it. But they also need to become a lot more adaptable. If you have the technical and functional skills, if you know what to do, but how you're doing it isn't as effective as it should be, then the difference between success and failure is going to be how you do it.
Ira, talk about being I believe you say a millennial trapped in a baby boomer body.
Yeah, well, I'm on screen, so you can see I got a baby boomer body. People tell me I look a little younger than I am, and that's a good thing. But it's still a baby boomer body, and believe me, the knees, the hips, the ankles, all those things definitely show it. But that doesn't necessarily reflect what's going on up here. Many of my peers, many of my colleagues have retired. Many have been retired. I've got this particular business I've had for 26 years. And frankly, I get up in the morning thinking it's a startup. And it's not a startup because I'm failing. It's a startup because I'm always reinventing it. I'm always reimagining what it could be. And, you know, I try to be very aware of what industry trends are. But that's the millennial mindset. And maybe it's a Gen Z mindset. I've had the millennial and the baby boomer body tag for a couple of years. And now the youngest generation's Gen Z and even going younger than that. But it's, and I wrote a book in 2008. And for anybody who was around in the workplace, Jason, you probably were there too. Everybody was talking about the four generations and how different they were, and especially the millennials. And the millennials get slammed for everything. They got blamed for bad attitudes. They got blamed for if a business went down. They got blamed for the financial crisis. They got blamed for the housing crisis. They got blamed for everything. If you were a millennial, you were responsible for everything bad that ever happens for mankind. Not true, because millennials didn't grow into that. They were, you know, they weren't uneducated because they chose to be. If they didn't get the education that they should have had, it was because of the baby boomers and the people older than them that didn't take care of the education system. But there were, like every generation, there's good people and there's bad people. There's motivated people and there's demotivated people. So there's a whole series of things going on. But I wrote the book. I sort of fell on that bandwagon and said, hey, maybe I can help. And I'm going to explain the difference between the oldest generation, which is called the traditionalists, the veterans, the baby boomers, the Gen X, and then the millennials. And if I explain the difference, then everybody's going to understand where that is. But it was still based on a chronological birth, when you were born. So if you were born in 1950, you were a baby boomer. If you're born in 1970, you were a Gen X. If you're born in 1980, you were a millennial. So if you had all those things, that explained it, because you were born at a different time. But within each of those generations, there were people that were motivated. There were people that were highly skilled. There were people that weren't so skilled. You had people that were always reinventing themselves. You had 25-year-olds who acted like they were 70, and you had 70-year-olds who acted like they were 20. I chose the latter pattern. And so when people talk about generations, I'd be careful at labeling people based on their age, and look more at their mindset, which got back to what we were talking before. If I'm a millennial, if I'm a baby boomer, maybe because of my age, I've developed grit and resilience, but that I have a very open mindset, that I can deal with paradox. Like, I try to make sense of things that shouldn't make sense to somebody else who's seeing it for the first time, only because I've had that experience. But I have that growth mindset, that I'm not set in my ways, and that I recognize that what got me here may not get me through the next 10 years, especially if I want to be in business. So I think the millennial in the baby boomer body is, I don't care what generation you pick. I don't care what body you got. It's more important to think in appropriately, and appropriately is everybody's got to reimagine who they are going forward, because the environment's going to change. There is not going to be a vote to say, well, let's vote on it. Do we want to go back to normal and go back to the way it was or not? We couldn't agree on that anyway, especially in the United States. We'd still have the 50-50 split. But individually, we're going to have to either accept that we're moving forward, or trying to go back. I just heard this the other day. It was a great question. Are you running toward the light, or are you running from the darkness? And that's a completely different mindset. Running from the darkness is a fear of what the darkness holds. And running toward the light is just is a path, and hopefully we're doing that. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's better. In the darkness can lie a lot of opportunity, and in the light can at the end of the tunnel could be a cliff. So you have to decide what you're doing and how you're going to approach it.
Ira, how do you personally keep track of keep up with all the tech changes, all the social media changes, AI, deep learning, on and on and on, right? How do you keep up? How do you keep track of all that stuff and keep up to date?
I wish I said I had an easy answer. It is really, really hard. My first book I wrote, it was called The Perfect Labor Storm. And the book, if you go look at it, it was a fact book. And what I did was every week I had a newsletter and I'd list 5 trends that I read that I thought were interesting. And I put them in. So at the end of the year, I had like 200 trends, and over 10 years, I had 2,000. So I had all these trends. And what I did was I categorized them into this was happening in education. This was happening with demographics. This was happening with women in the workplace. And it got hard. It got hard because there were so many different things. There were so many different aspects. And so I increased the list to 10, and that didn't help. In 2007, at the financial crash, I actually moved to a new community. Great timing to buy a house. I bought it at its peak, and then the market crashed. And I moved into a new community, and, talking about hiring people, just nobody was talking about hiring people. But I always had a knack for marketing. I was already using, this is 2007, 2008. I was already on Facebook, and that was as a baby boomer. So where everybody else was pretty young. I started to play around with Twitter. I had a YouTube, I started to have a YouTube channel. So I was doing social media, even that back then. And when you start, it was easy because I actually started to teach classes at the community college, and people come in, and I was teaching the basics of what it was and how you can use it for business. But in the middle of one class, Facebook, I had all these not slides, but I had handouts and instructions. Literally in the middle of a class, Facebook did an update. So things that I was teaching them to do didn't exist anymore. And all of a sudden I couldn't even find how to make an edit. And then it also rolls out, which means half the class had the old version and some of the class had the new version. I quickly realized that I couldn't be an expert in social media. I could be an expert. I would have to devote all my time to Facebook because Twitter was coming along. And then YouTube started to make changes. And then Pinterest showed up. It was constantly a barrage of new things happening. And that's what life is. And I do social media for myself. I don't teach it. I just couldn't keep up with all the change. But I did go down the road of future of work, and I follow quite a few people on what's happening. But even when you talk about the future of work, it's not only AI and machine learning, we're really not there yet, but everybody claims they got AI. So we won't go into that story. But you get into things like natural language programming, processing. So, it's Alexa, hopefully that's not on, or my Alexa will come on right now and start talking to me. But Alexa or Siri or Katana, whoever you're talking to, there's more and more of that going on. And that could be used, going back to our conversation about HR, is rather than having to have someone physically in their office or on a screen answering a question, many of the questions that get asked during the day can certainly be put into a knowledge base that an employee has a question about how many hours, what is this covered under the policy, or how many days do I have left in my for vacation. That all can be automated, and that's a combination of AI, and it's a combination of natural language NLP, natural language. But you also, what's going to happen to companies? What about 3D printing? How is that going to affect construction? How is that going to affect manufacturing? How does it affect skills that we're going to require? So there's all these things. So when we talk about technology, we're talking about 3D printing, we're talking about AI, machine learning, sensors, the Internet of Things, we're talking about devices. It's huge. And it's a long answer for what could be very short. I have no clue. I feel like I'm drowning in it. I feel that while I'm recognized at the top of the list by a couple organizations as, one of the influencers on future work, I really do feel like an imposter at times, because there are other people that seem to be more knowledgeable. They write every day about it, about the advances. Yet when I talk to them, they feel like imposters too. Things are, when the experts are feeling like they're falling behind and trying to keep up with everything, that's a bit worrisome, but it also fits the definition that we're living in this age of perpetual uncertainty.
Yeah, I know we were talking about Clubhouse before you got on a talk. And like a Clubhouse, man, like it's another great platform, but is it just another time sucker, right? Because it has so many good
Oh,
conversations.
it's definitely a time suck.
And you're like, well, like, yeah. And, and there's so many changes going on.
It depends what you want. I mean, so that's a great conversation. For those who don't know what Clubhouse is, you can go to joinclubhouse.com. And all that does is tell you a little bit about what it is. And you can, if you're interested in signing up, it's only on the iOS, the Apple platform right now. So you have to have an Apple device to even log in. And then it's by invitation only. So you have to be if you have to know somebody that can invite you in.
Which is brilliant marketing on their part, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to evolve, but there's, millions of people that are on there. As I said, it's definitely a time suck. But if you go in with, hey, I'm going to meet people, or I'm just going to learn something, think of going to a conference, and it's not necessarily in a convention center, but it's in the city. And every house, every business, every office has an open door, and they say, here's my agenda, and I can select any place I want to go for free to learn something. That's what Clubhouse is like. It's this huge conference center, and people are talking everything, from marketing to the future of work. It's not all HR, by the way. How to start a business, how to use Clubhouse, how to eliminate poverty, what should we be doing about racial inequality, social issues, climate change. So there's a million places you can go. Some of them are interesting, some of them are not, but there's a lot of choices. Plus you're getting a perspective of people around the world. So if you go in and you have time on your hands, you'll fill it up quickly. But I wouldn't discourage people, because I've been, this morning, I actually moderated a room, a Clubhouse room. We talked about adaptability. And we had about 20 people, and about 4 or 5 people came up on stage, because as I said, I wasn't there to present or speak, or I was there to moderate. I had certainly my opinions, but I went in there just to collaborate with other people. It's really like an interactive, you and I are interactive, but can you imagine if we can bring other people into this conversation right now, what that would look like. And they may challenge us, they may agree, or they can take this conversation down a different road. So Clubhouse is interesting. I think the fact that it's sort of crude right now, it's in beta. They literally are building it as, every day there's a new update, there's a new change. They're not even on the Android devices yet, so that's going to be a big improvement. But it's not the end. It's not the only platform. There's they call it, it's basically an audio-based social media. There's half a dozen that are already out there, and there'll certainly be more. But I think that's just the one step on the journey, is how do you take the LinkedIn or the Facebook tag? How do you take the like and turn it into some type of a more robust engagement between the two of us? Not that you post something, Jason, and I like it, but is what else could be there? How do we make it easier to interact? How can I really, rather than have a choice of I can like or I can clap, how can I express my feeling when I'm feeling through that? That's what's going to happen. So a lot of these tools are going to change, but it's definitely a rabbit hole. All this stuff is a rabbit hole. The future's a rabbit hole.
They definitely are. So next, let's talk about future work. So is the day coming where all the robots and AI are going to do all the jobs for us, so we just sit out and drink beer and barbecue every day?
Again, it depends by industry. We were I was interviewed the other day. We have a podcast that focuses on the construction industry. And they said, so how do you think the the trades. It's so hard for people to find people in the trades, and it is. There's no question about it. And they're good professions. So that's, gets a whole conversation about education. And if you want a good career, do you need a college degree, or could you be a welder or a plumber or HVAC tech? But he was really struggling with understanding how the workplace was going to change for construction, and where many construction companies they have the work, but they can't find good project managers. They can't find enough superintendents. And what's a superintendent do? They go on site and they look around. They see what's going on. They check the progress. Why can't you do that with a drone? You
Good
can.
point.
Yeah, you can. So do you absolutely need a superintendent driving through all the traffic, going site to site? You have a big area. Maybe he needs to be there sometimes, but does he need to be there all the time? But they need the skills, because a lot of the people that grew up in the trades don't necessarily have the digital or technical skills. How will 3D printing, change that? I wrote this in my book. You have, and you would think I lived in the HVAC world, but I don't. But there are great examples, and because I do have a residence, and I do have I do have heat and plumbing and all those things, I can relate. But it was like, so currently, we had service on our heat pump, and the part guy came and he says, "Oh, you need a part, but I don't have it. We have to order it. I'll go back to the shop and see if one was there." And then he called and says, "I don't have it. Well, he'll be overnight. We'll be back tomorrow." Okay, that makes sense. But that's so like 2019-ish. What would happen is if he goes into his truck and he has a 3D printer and they can print the part right there. We're not there yet, but it could be right there. Or what if they send a drone over with the part from wherever it was? How does that change work? And now people may say, what's that have to do with me? What's that have to do with work? Well, the work site for somebody in HVAC or plumbing or electrical or any of the trades, the work site is your home. It's your business. That's where they work. They work at your site. So all those things of how does the workplace change for even something that doesn't seem like it would be knowledge-based in the future. Now, for more service-oriented, knowledge-based jobs, we already talked a little bit about that, is going to be remote work. What's collaboration look like? Everybody says, "Oh yeah, we're much more comfortable doing this type of a thing." You and I have probably been doing it for a while, but there's people that never would have thought of being on a Zoom call before, and there is Zoom fatigue. But they had to learn how to do it. They had to get comfortable. They had to figure out a setting. They had to get positioned. They had to get comfortable talking on screen. But it's still sort of a two-dimensional conversation. It's all we did was you and I are talking, and we just put a screen in the middle. But how would we interact? How do I shake hands? How do I engage? How do I explain something to you that may be on your website, but you don't even know how to show me what that website is? That's leading into virtual reality, which other than the technology right now, the headsets are heavy. I mean, people may not even know what I'm talking about, but I've got an Oculus, I've got a headset. It's a little clunky. They're at least down to $200-300 now, so they're not in the $1,500 range. But people have to learn how to use it. But if the technology gets smoother, and in 2 or 3 years we are able to just put on maybe a lens that's something like my glasses, and all of a sudden you and I are not looking through the screen at one another, and the people that are listening or watching in this are not necessarily looking at a screen, but they're in a headset and we're looking on either side, and we're right there together in a virtual space. That's what's missing in Zoom. That's what's missing in all these venues, is that we took how we interacted at work, put a screen in between us and said, oh, we're virtual. No, you're not. You're digital. All we're doing is exchanges. There's just millions and millions of bits and bytes that are flowing through the screens, thrown through the internet, coming up in pixels. And that's all it is. But we're still distant. But how do we take that distance and make it local? And that's the next step. And we'll be there. But that completely changes the environment of how we do things. So the future of work is just evolving. Now, with that is you can't have what's company culture look like? How do you have engagement when you have people distributed across the country that may have never met physically before? How do you develop that engagement? How do you manage somebody? How do you keep them in the zone? How do you keep them in the flow? How do you make them feel that they're part of a company culture where before there were a lot of toxic cultures? Just because you had a physical building didn't mean that there was a culture that people walked in and go, aha, I feel better. It's not Disney. Some people, they walked in and they start choking because on the way in, they start choking because it's a toxic environment. So, but building a culture remotely is difficult, but a lot of companies have figured it out pretty quickly. There is, you can use technology, you can use you can have ongoing conversations with things like Slack, some of the tools that are out there, but certainly the monitor, certainly the just doing it through a screen is a bit challenging.
Yeah, one thing I think as a society we either don't realize or forget is like how often we actually upgrade skills, right? I mean, it happens more often than we think. Like even go back to the day when the car first took over. Remember reading somewhere that there were people like protesting the cars because all the people would like go behind the horses, pick up the horse shit, right? Be out of jobs, right? I mean, it's a continuous process, right? We're always upgrading skills, correct?
Yeah. Oh, well, there's definitely going to have to be an upskilling and a reskilling of the skills. Some of those jobs that used to exist just don't exist anymore. They just plain out, don't exist.
So next, talk about your podcast. I believe it's called Geeks Geezers and Googlization. How long have you been doing that?
We'll keep on the Googlization theme. I've had it for 2.5 years. We've done about 170 shows. We broadcast live, similar to this, and it actually started as a radio show. It's live. It was live talk radio. I haven't always done a lot of talk, but it was live talk radio. We bring on a guest, just like I'm your guest, experts in the field. We've had people talking about future work. Yesterday, we had somebody talk about actually investing in, or last Wednesday, we do it Wednesdays, investing in diversity and social impact. It was an angel investor, and she exclusively works with startups and entrepreneurs who have a social impact that they're looking to change the world through medicine or lifestyle or climate change. And she works a lot with minorities. So 50% of her investments are people of color, and another 50% are women entrepreneurs. Currently, that's her portfolio. Now, within the people of color, there's some men, but basically, it's that's her focus. That's who she looks for to invest in that. Next week we're having somebody talking about the future of women in the workplace, from how technology sometimes discriminates against not only minorities but women of the hiring processes, and it's built in there. So how does that get changed? We've had people talking about employee experience, candidate experience, recruitment, hiring, you name it, but it all fits under that umbrella of, we're talking about people, old and young, wired and tired, and technology, and how it's changing the world. And it's fun. You get to meet, just as you do with your podcast, you get to meet a lot of interesting people.
So in your company, you have like 2,600 online courses on your website, if I'm correct. Like, how do you keep them up to date? That's what I want to know. Like 2,600, that's a lot to keep up to date. It's like, it's an automated process you do. You have a team. I'm sure you can't do that by yourself. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, well, not only don't I do it by myself, I actually am partnered. I actually have, I'm a reseller technically from another company that does that. It fit well into our branding, and we created a relationship with them. Uh, I I'm not a I'm not a trainer. I'm not an instructional designer. I, I can make my own videos, but I couldn't do it I want to put myself out there with people that are experts in designing, learning. So I work with a company. And if you go up to our website at successperformancesolutions.com, you'll see some of the offerings that are there. But there are now more than 2,600 courses. I don't know what the count is, but it may be 2,700 or 2,800. So I rely on them, but they update them every month. I get an email as an update, and there are some that have been updated that might have been out for a year or two. So especially if it has to do with compliance. So we in those offerings, there's things such as, teaching people how to use Word and Excel, and how to be a better service person, or how to be a better supervisor, how personal development. So there's some things that aren't going to change overnight, but there are compliance videos in there, and they may change as the laws change. So how do you update those? So every month they go through the file and update those. It's much more difficult. Obviously, with a video, you recorded the video, and if you have to re-record the video. I mean, it's sometimes tough to edit that, or you can take out that section, but you want to make it a smooth transition. But other times there's new ones that come on board. So last year when I actually introduced them, I was in conversation with them for quite a while, and I just had to find the right time. They released a whole section of COVID-19, what a company should do. What are some precautions? It was also educational for the employees. And rather than companies trying to go out and do it on their own, that was included in the portfolio. So they put those out there. Now, a year later, some of what they were talking about then, some of the protocols and some of the knowledge that we had at that point is different. So they're not as, those specific courses aren't as relevant, so they update them. So again, you need to really work with. There are people that have built good courses, online courses. I can tell you, I tried it. I built one for my book, Recruiting in the Age of Googlization. It's a lot of work. It's a ton of work, and then something happens and you have to change it. So that's not my expertise, so I rely on other people to do that. The core part of my business is really working on, we provide 90% of my activity is working with companies, helping them hire better. And that's done through, we do pre-employment and leadership assessments.
So how do you do these assessments?
Well, again, I rely on people that are experts on building them. I don't, as I give the example. I've driven a vehicle, a car for a long time. It doesn't make me an expert at repairing it. There are people that are really, really good at building the vehicles, and there are people good at maintaining the vehicles, and there are people that are good at driving the vehicles. I drive the vehicle. So from the assessments, I rely on industrial organizational psychologists, and I work with a number of different platforms on that. So we offer, and there's a huge difference, because we offer assessments that test for skills like typing, data entry, Word, Excel. There's a right and wrong answer. People either know how to do it or they don't. So those are relatively easy to create. But I didn't want to be a technology company. I had the opportunity a couple times to invest or buy a software company, or a company that made tests. I didn't necessarily want to own a software company. I'd rather just provide their products. So we have skill testing at that end, but we also do leadership testing. We do integrity testing, and that's a combination of more traditional assessments that are a series of questions. Do we agree or disagree with those type things? You may be familiar. We don't provide Myers-Briggs MBTI, but many people may be familiar with that. That's a great development tool. It shouldn't be used for hiring. But we have DISC, which is a comparable one, DISC. But we have 3 or 4 different platforms that utilize the Big Five model, or what they call Ocean model. That's been used in businesses for close to 70 years now. They identified through the research 5 traits that were pretty universal. They weren't psychological. They're certainly about our personality, which fits in psychology, but they can be correlated with business activity. So, again, extroversion and introversion is one. So again, if you're in sales, or, maybe you're more inclined to be an extrovert. If you're more internal in accounting or engineering, maybe you're more inclined to be an introvert, but it's not exclusive. People use them inappropriately. I know really good salespeople who are introverts, and I know really good engineers who are extroverted. So again, there's some interpretation that needs to be put in that. But the tests are all, valid, and there's 3 elements that we look for. One is, are they validated? And everything we use has been validated, which means they test. If we're testing for extroversion, that's what it tests for. It's not testing for something else. So everything that we test for has been validated. It's reliable, meaning if you took the test today, would you get a similar result tomorrow or next week? So it's not related to our mood. So that's a second factor. And the third factor is a job relevant. There is, you can test for attention to detail, but if the person doesn't need to be detailed, you're going to discriminate against people who may not be good with math. Maybe they're just dyslexic. But if that doesn't matter, then don't test for it. You shouldn't do that. It's not the test that's wrong. It's that you're using the wrong test. So we look at validity, reliability, and job relevance on every situation. And sometimes I can figure that out with a 5-minute conversation with the client, because I ask him one question. At the end of a year, if this person that you hire using one of our assessments works out, what is it they'll have to accomplish? How will you measure success at the end of a year? Do they have to sell so much? Do they have to produce so many widgets? Do they have to reduce turnover? What do they have to do? How are you going to measure their success? And believe it, well, you'd believe it because you're in the field. A lot of people don't have that. They don't know. Well, it's sort of a changing position. Well, then how do you evaluate them? How do you know? Because you might have hired them on one thing, and then 6 months later you change the job and they're not any good at it. That doesn't mean it was a lousy test. It doesn't mean that they're not a good person. You hired them to do one thing and then you changed. So if you want flexibility and you want people to be good at everything, then you need to hire people that or train them. So I always ask, and from that I work backwards of how do they accomplish that? What do they have to do? And then we can test for it. So it sounds like it's this complicated process. 99% of the clients we have are small, medium-sized businesses. We have a couple large ones. I got a couple publicly traded companies as well. But most of the clients we have are small, medium-sized businesses. Many times they don't even have an HR person. They don't have somebody dedicated to this. And the assessments really help give some objectivity to what they're doing. Obviously, many people aren't good interviewers. It's hard. Interviewees, candidates have often undergone more coaching and training how to be interviewed than interviewers have learned how to interview. Even resumes. People hire people to write the resumes. People aren't always trained at how do you screen a resume. What should you look for, and how should you take that information and interview people. So there's a lot to be done, but the testing is really a third-party objective way to give insight. And we don't suggest you use it instead of interviewing. We suggest you use it to improve interviewing, because if you have an outlier, if it exposes a weakness or a vulnerability, then it makes your interview better, because you can focus exactly on the area that might show up in the workplace. So let's say that you're looking for somebody that there's a lot of you're looking for somebody who can inspire people. You're looking for people that can motivate. Your last manager, the complaint was he sent memos. He didn't talk to people. So you're looking to make sure that doesn't happen. And you get a result and it says the next person has great reviews, tremendous experience, but they're in the 40 percentile of introversion. Oh gosh, that won't work. We needed somebody different. Well, no, you can talk to them and find out, how do they handle that? What do they do? What have they learned? Do they have good self-awareness? Do they understand that sometimes they have to come out of their comfort zone and engage people, that you just can't keep sending them texts and memos, that sometimes you have to walk down or do a Zoom call. And so there are ways around it, but it would expose a vulnerability during the interview and help improve it. I do, as I said, I'll repeat it. I don't recommend. It's not as easy as saying, use our test and you don't have to interview anybody anymore. And that goes for anybody's test. It's not just ours. That's just not a good best practice. And you'll get in trouble, doing that way. But if you use it to enhance your interview and your selection, it's incredibly valuable.
So the recruiting space is pretty crowded, right? I mean, there's all these one-person HR recruiters. There's recruiting companies who do the old school. It's like every day there's like 10 new AI HR tech recruiting companies that we're gonna fix recruiting. We're gonna fix this, but it doesn't like anything's gonna be fixed, right? It's like there's still a hiring disconnects, recruiting disconnects. Is recruiting or hiring process getting better, or is it just this loop that keeps on going over and over again?
Wow. So yeah, I'm in that discussion all the time. Is it getting better? Yes. Is it getting better fast enough? No, because it was pretty far behind. And a lot of, they call it the HR tech stack. I've been in some pretty rich conversations about this lately. The HR tech stack, it started out that even a spreadsheet is a piece of tech. It's a technology. So it's rudimentary, but so you have a recruiting and you take all the applicants you have and you throw them into this spreadsheet. It shouldn't have been just data collection. It should have been the ability to analyze it and make your process better. But then we went to ATS, and then the ATS was built for the employer. It created a pretty horrible candidate experience, and then companies got better at the candidate experience, and then they said, "Oh, we can add text onto it." So because your candidates don't pick up the phone, they don't respond to voicemail, they don't check their emails, but if you text them or you're on WhatsApp or using social media, it's a good way to do that. So now, okay, we need another piece of tech to go onto there. What about video conference? Oh yeah, we're going to use video now for everybody. So we built this stack. We had a foundation. The picture I want you to create in your mind is the Jenga tower. If you're familiar with Jenga, little blocks, and you build them up, and then you try to slide one out and you put it someplace else, and then eventually it topples over. That's sort of what the HR tech stack is. That's sort of what's become of recruitment. So is it better? In some degrees, it has been, because we can now, companies can process hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of applications quickly and filter them out. Now there are problems with the algorithms, but that wasn't a problem with the technology. That's a problem with the companies bought the technology to fix the broken process. If your screening process, if your job description, if your job ads just are like throwing a shotgun out there, if your job ads discriminate, you use words that are male oriented, and you're trying to create a more diverse population and attract women into male dominated fields, into nursing and engineering. If you still use, if the words you use can be unintentionally biased and discriminate, that it would turn off minorities or people of color or ethnicities. So it became a science. It became an art and a science of how do you change your job posting to be universal and not inherently discriminate. If you have the best technology in the world and you're using you're still using a copy and pasted job description written by an employment law attorney, it's not going to attract the best people. All technology has done is make bad processes worse. But if you have a good process, then you select a technology that can help automate that. And the automation isn't to replace the human being, it's to get rid of the tedious work, the repetitive work. So instead of spending all the time or hiring somebody to put all the names in the spreadsheet, where then you have an ATS and you hire people to create the status reports and screen them out. And there's companies that have an ATS and then they print out all the resumes, which is insane. It sort of defeats the process. But if you have a good process in place, you know the type of what are the screening questions that can weed people out, then it's improved. So like everything else is we're sort of going through this division. We're having the companies that get it and are improving. They're getting better a little bit at a time. It's not everybody recognizes that it's far from, I wouldn't say it's far from perfect and may even be far from good, but it's getting better. But you have other companies that are still doing this manually. It's insane. I mean, they put a job up on Indeed and they get hundreds of applications of people who are unqualified, who just hit a quick apply, and then they complain about the quality of candidates. There are good people out there. It's just too easy to apply for a job, but you're not going to, by complaining, you're not changing it. But there are ways to, if your process is, if you improve your process, you will eliminate the problems that most people have. If anybody listens to any of the interviews I've done, and I've done lots of them, I always say the bar is really, really low. The good thing about companies, especially in recruitment and HR, you don't have to be perfect. You don't even have to be really good. All you need to do is be better than your competitor. And the competitor may not be in the same industry, by the way. They may be a competitor chasing down the same type of people in your business, especially at the front line work. But you don't have to be really good because companies are really bad. So, but yeah, I do think, Jason, fortunately, it's improving. Technology is a big part of it. But the HR tech stack is like this Jenga tower, and people keep slapping on one more piece of technology every year when the whole thing really needs to be almost torn down and rebuilt. And it's happening. There are companies that are out there that are relooking at it. But it's a big issue, and there's nothing perfect yet. So it's like the early days of the computer. I'm going to wait till the next one comes out so I don't have to get rid of this one. And then all that happened was they kept accelerating it. So if anybody is still waiting around to wait for the perfect computer that is going to, if I spend this much money, I'm not going to have to replace it in 2 or 3 years. That's not going to happen either.
So I believe I read that you do an average of 100 podcasts a year. I mean, that's insane. So it's 100 podcasts you do a year. Well,
I do 50. I do somewhere between 48 and 52. I don't do 52 because nobody's going to listen to what I have to say on New Year's and Christmas Day.
No, I mean that you're the guest on 100 podcasts a year.
Yeah, I didn't do it. Last year I was about 75, which is a lot. And then again, I also had the opportunity in the spring when nobody knew what was going on. I was like on 1 or 2 a day. So but it's a lot. Yeah. I mean, especially doing 50 of my own, and then, even doing one additional one or two a week. I've had a lot of interviews, and I'm grateful. It gets the word out. I get to learn conversations. Somebody asks me something in a certain way, like you did today. You learn from I learn from my hosts. I learn from my guests. And sometimes, some of the things I shared today, I just learned this week, and, it comes out and it helps reframe it.
So follow up with a question, and we talked about this a little bit before. Talk about the importance of people putting themselves out there, whether you're regardless of your age or you're an entrepreneur or just a worker, the importance of putting yourself out there in today's age.
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. There's a lot of talk these days about being, having your personal brand. Who are you? How are you going to identify yourself? And it's not just, oh yeah, I got a social media page and that's who I am. Well, it may be. I mean, some people are sharing more, but a lot of people don't share a lot of things. They use them for business only. So you really don't get to see that they have a dog and a cat and a kid and, whatever. I mean, that's changed a lot too with Zoom. We got to actually have a lot more authenticity and transparency. We got to see people inside people's homes. I got to see where your desk is. I got to see where you work. May not have gotten to see that before. See the cat jump up on the desk, see what you drink. So there's all those things. Where we're going down the road is that as well. I think that is certainly changing how we, how the podcast, how the interviews, how those conversations, are going to change. But what is our personal brand? People are going to have a personal brand. I don't think it's going to be everybody on the planet. I mean, everybody on the planet has a personal brand. And that goes back to even our testing. Oftentimes, people know you better than you know yourself. They go, no, I don't think I'm that way. And then everybody laughs. I don't think, a report might say you're nitpicky, or, sometimes you speak without thinking and you go, no, I used to do that, but I've gotten a lot better. And then everybody around you that knows you well sort of laughs because they know you do it in part. But personal branding is important. You are your brand. When you go represent yourself, you are your brand. You're not your job title. You are not you're not your education. People go in and go, tell me about yourself. Well, I've got a 4-year degree in biology and I have 6 years of experience and I'm a HR generalist, or I'm an HR professional, or I'm an executive. That's not your brand. That's not who you are. You are not defined by your job title. You're not defined by the years of education. People think they are, and in the past, that was important. If you went to Harvard or Yale versus, Clarion State University, it was like, yeah, that was part of the brand. People are getting away from that. There are many people. Hasn't been turned off, but people are starting to look at, who are you? Why did you choose that school versus another? Who are you as a person? What can you contribute? What value? Which raises an interesting question on where does the personal brand fit? I read this. There's a book out by Gary Hamel, and I'm drawing a blank, so I apologize to his co-author. It's called Humanocracy. And it talks about moving from a bureaucracy to a humanocracy. But he didn't ask this directly, but it popped into my mind. Is that how many companies out there say people are our most important assets? That it's in a million mission statement, value statements, posters, job ads. In the future, and this is being dictated by partly the millennials, but Gen Z, the workplace, changing environment, future of work. What if an organization was an employee's most important asset? And by that means, I'm not saying that in the past, like my parents or grandparents, is that the company sort of owned you, that they took care of you, that they paid you, they gave you benefits, gave you a retirement plan, they took care of your health insurance, your disability, all that sort of stuff. I'm not talking about just tangible. I'm talking about that the company is an asset in your career growth, that maybe you'll be here for 4 or 5 years and we'll give you every tool in the world, but we recognize that you have more potential than what you can realize if you stayed here. So we're going to help you grow. We're going to help you in your well-being. We're going to help you stay healthier. We're going to help you grow. And then at some point, we hope there's an opportunity here, but you may leave, but you'll always be an alumni. That sounds like a an idyllic, you know, crazy, crazy ass kind of conception. But that's ultimately getting away from just saying people are our most important assets. And they go, oh yeah, we're starting to put them on our balance sheet. Yeah, we can measure people now and see it is a very good, we got a good return on investment on our asset. That's culturally, that's not going to work anymore. But the reverse is, how can an organization be the employee's most important asset? And what do they want out of life? What's their career? I mean, it's all going to be different. Not everybody has high aspirations. Everybody has different goals. Some people want to make sure they have enough money in the bank to pay for their kids' education. Other people, want to take care of their parents. Other people want to travel. Other people want to get an advanced degree. What can you do to help the person? But that has to start with the personal brand. If you don't have your personal brand, you don't understand who you are, then the company is going to shape that for you. But if you do have a personal brand, then you know what your goals are, and you can look for employers that help support that. And there's a lot of conversations around that, and it's going to take a long way to get there. there's no doubt. But we had a tipping point last year, and there's a lot of organizations that had a wake-up call, and we'll see.
Our next question, we're going to go back way back in the day. Why did you want to be a dentist in the 5th grade?
No idea. It came my turn. Unfortunately, I was a W and I was near the end of the alphabet. And the teacher went around the room, and, part of it was influence from my parents. Grow up, they owned a retail store in a small coal mining town. They made a good living, but it was hard work. The goal of every aspiring parent was that your kids for that generation would graduate college, and especially get a degree in a profession, accounting, law. So somewhere I decided I was going to be a dentist, and I was just stubborn enough that at every family event, anytime anybody asked me, what do you want to do? And you go, well, you still want to be a dentist? And I go, sure. But there was no inspiration from family. It was sort of a goal that I set. I did well. I did well in high school. I did well in college, did well in dental school, did well in my practice. I had a hugely successful practice. But as I said in my TED Talk, I loved it. I learned that I loved everything about dentistry but dentistry. I loved the journey, which is also part of what we talk about a lot with the growth mindset. Is there are people that love the journey, and there's people that only love winning. But winning is never enough, because then you want to win again. So some people are motivated by the journey, and we're all on a journey. So everybody needs to get comfortable with that aspect. But I love the challenge. I love the steps getting there. I loved opening the doors on my practice. I loved expanding the practice. I loved building another building. I loved hiring more people. I loved growing it. But the problem is with dentistry is ultimately it's a relationship. If you come to me and I tell you you need a root canal and a crown and $5,000 worth of treatment, I can't tell you, great, I'm going to have my associate do it. They go, no, we came to you. We like you. We want you to do it. So there's still this end of the funnel. It's tough to scale. I mean, I can do it for, I was able to do it for cleaning, but I learned 30 years ago. Initially it was going to be, I was going to consult just dentist, and I would do it part-time. I quickly learned I just didn't enjoy going into the office even 20 hours a week. And so I got out. But in my TED Talk, I talked about how I loved everything about dentistry, but it also relates to today. People say, well, how did you make that switch? I mean, how do you go from dentistry to HR? How do you go from dentistry to business? I loved what I loved about the dentistry. I loved leading it. I loved growing it. I liked the marketing of it. I liked working with people. I liked the team building. I liked the service. I liked improving processes. I liked systems. I was computerized in 1989. That's 31 years ago. My office was completely computerized. we had those intraoral cameras where you can put a little camera inside and shows up on a big screen. I had the first version of that in 1991. That's what I did. Leaving that practice 26 years ago, 25 years ago. When I walked out the door, all I did was say, well, I'm not going to drill and fill anymore. That was the only thing that changed. I started a business. I marketed. I networked. I had a concept. I put it together. I didn't sell dental services anymore. I sold consulting services. I worked with people. I helped people. I inspired people. I helped them get over their anxieties, their fear. Now it became a fear of testing. You know, what happens if this person doesn't work out? What happens, you know, if the test isn't right? I mean, people have all these perceptions of things that are different, but I'm the same person in that respect of how I approached running a business. So I often said I had a marketing business that just happened to be, well, I had a business that happened to be in dentistry. And if I got more specific, I probably had a marketing business that just happened to be in dentistry. And now I have a business in HR or a business in marketing, and maybe even bigger than that, because I do a lot of writing and speaking and podcasts. I have a content creation company that just happens to be in the HR space.
So next, can you talk more about your company, like how it came about, what you're working on now, and what's the future for your company is going to be?
Yeah, again, another good question. I've had it for 25 years. It probably conceived about 27 years ago, but I've had officially 25 years. We're in the 26th. Success Performance Solutions is the name. It evolved. It didn't start out this way. It evolved into testing, pre-employment and leadership testing. I really liked the diagnostics. That's the part I liked about dentistry as well. I love solving the problems that people had. I just didn't want to do the work. So I was the radiologist, the diagnostician. I wasn't necessarily the surgeon, although I did like surgery, by the way, but I didn't like doing it over and over again. So we're still there. That's evolved. We've had a couple new platforms, new improvements. Testing in these day and age has to be much more savvy as far as the mobile experience. 96% of adults in the US own a smartphone. For many people, this is the only device that they have, the only connection to the internet and to the rest of the people that they got. Going back to recruitment, most job ads, most work is done on a desktop prior to last year. And they send the message to somebody who has a phone this big. So, the next evolution with testing became, how do you make a better candidate experience? Somebody likes taking an assessment, but how do you make it a better experience? So that's evolving. There is one of the new tools we have, the adaptability quotient, is actually a chatbot that it's not a statement that you agree with or disagree with. You do agree and disagree with the statement, but it's all done through a chatbot. You have a conversation. They're literally doing the assessment through questions through the chat. So, it's improving the candidate experience. I'm excited about that. More and more companies are looking, how do we hire the right people? If we hire this person, we really need, sometimes people just need warm bodies, but what type of training and education, what type of onboarding do we need? That's evolving. So rather than, we're getting more involved in that. 5 years from now, what's testing going to look like? I'm excited about. I don't know. I mean, ideally, maybe there's going to be more virtual reality, augmented reality, some types of simulations that we can use. That's certainly going to be a key. But hopefully, I'm still doing the business then. I think we'll be in some form of testing. But again, I've been doing a lot of work on the adaptability quotient, helping people become more comfortable with change. And our focus is, how do you help people get the courage and build the confidence, which will give them hope for a more positive future, because a lot of people are pretty scared right now of what's next.
So you have a quote, I believe it goes, resilience is for sissies, AQ is your mojo. Can you explain that?
Yeah, resilience is for sissies. So as you know, resilience became the word of the year in 2020 by a lot of organizations. People talk about, but resilience is just bouncing back. It's like Weeble. You know, it's the old punching bag. You knock it over, it comes back. But it doesn't help you grow and thrive. And the problem is when we come out of this pandemic or any of the change, the world is going to be different. The environment's going to be different. The labor markets are going to be different. The demand, the consumer markets are going to be different. So all that's going to change. Grit is perseverance. So if you think about grit, it's that vehicle that plows through that brick wall. It's that SWAT machine that kind of breaks through the wall. It gets through unscathed, but again, the environment around it is pretty similar. It just survived. So there's so much emphasis put on bouncing back and going back to normal that I think people think that if they survive, that's going to be good enough. The problem is things are going to have evolved a great deal. The markets, the skills we need, the demands on us, the expectations, the uncertainty is still going to be around. So we talk a lot about moving to the next step. How do you get people to grow and thrive? And I mentioned this earlier, mental flexibility, being able to deal with that uncertainty, being able to deal with paradox. We hear two different sides of the news. How do we make sense of it? We're going to have to become better at that. How do we become better at that growth mindset, at that openness of becoming more comfortable with not being perfect, and unlearning those behaviors. So we're working resilience is for sissies. It's a little bit brash. It gets people's attention. But it's literally not good enough. It just gets you to a point that you can say, I'm a survivor. But when you look around, the world is going to have moved past you. And so are a lot of other people, and so are a lot of opportunities. But it does take courage. I mean, it takes courage to persevere. It takes courage to bounce back. But we need people not only to have the courage, but the confidence to take another step, to try it again. Again, nobody's going to flip the switch and we're just going back to some way it used to be. So how do you get people to take one step, then a second, then a third? And hopefully when they've done that, then not only have they taken the third, they'll take the fourth step on their own. And when they do that, the world looks a little bit better. And that's the hope. So we talk about resilience is for sissies, is about not just having the courage to get through this and calling yourself a survivor, but having the confidence, and most importantly, not feeling that your job's going to be stolen by a robot, that, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. What you need is people, I wake up in the morning, I don't wake up depressed. I sometimes I get depressed by the end of the day, if I listen to the news too much, or if I look at some other things. But the reality is I wake up every day with a pretty positive outlook that I'm excited to go to work. I mean, sometimes it's Blur's Day or Groundhog Day lately, but I've got a lot of things on my plate, a lot of things I want to do. I don't look at like I'm doing this for nothing because maybe the world's going to end tomorrow. I'm doing this because the world's going to be here, and I want to be ready for it. How do you get more people to do that? And so resilience is for sissies is about helping more people get comfortable with the world we're going to live in. And, we need a lot more people that are less pessimistic and more optimistic.
Ira, do you have a favorite social media platform right now?
Do I have a favorite? No, because they're all sort of a pain in the butt and their time sucks. I use, because I'm B2B, I use LinkedIn the most. So I certainly enjoy that. A lot of people don't think of YouTube as a social media. But we use it all the time, whether it's how to look up something, how to do something, a cute video. I don't do cat videos, but I do a lot of 1-minute videos, like an excerpt, something that I might have done on a podcast, and then go, hey, that sounded pretty good. So I'll take that 1-minute clip or 2-minute clip out. So I use that. Clubhouse, I'm enjoying it so far. I mean, the first week it was really a time suck. It's like, where did the week go? I was even, I threw it on when I went to the shower instead of listening to some music. I threw it on Clubhouse just to listen to a conversation. Now it's, sort of that edge has come off, but I do hop in. And yesterday I was in a great conversation with someone. The day before, I hopped into a room and met a lot of really good people, learned a lot in the half hour I was there. So I guess if I had to say which is my favorite at the moment, it's probably Clubhouse. But ultimately, I'm on them all the time, but I try to watch what I do.
I definitely know what you mean. Ira, you're writing a book now. You just released a book.
No, the Recruiting in the Age of Googlization first came out in 2017, last February. We did an update. I added almost 100 pages to it, added 6 chapters, updated it a bit, some of the things we didn't talk about. There's probably there's a book definitely in my head. It's probably in 100 different pages in Google Docs at the moment. Definitely going to be writing something. I don't know if it'll be an ebook or a full book or an update to the Googlization on adaptability. I'm from a personal passion and a purpose. There's just so many people that are fearful about the future, and again, I want to get people comfortable with it. And so, yeah, there's a book coming out, but I don't know what it is. The closest to that is probably I've got a free ebook up on my website. It's When the Shift Hits Your Plan, which is the subtitle of this book. That was the original title. And that talks about mostly, the change, the future of work. But that too needs to be updated. That's almost 2 years. The most current edition of that is about 2 years old. And so much has changed. So I do a lot of writing, so people, or a lot of talking, a lot of videos. So if you want my book in like mini chapters in draft form, you can either listen to and my interviews go up to the Success Performance Solution site, and under About Me, About Us, you'll see almost all my interviews are there, and that'll form my next book.
Ira, is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, we covered a lot of territory, and I appreciate that. Thank you. It's one of the more comprehensive, in-depth interviews, and frankly, running out of things to talk about. For people, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Ira Wolf. The site currently is down. Hopefully that's going to be up over the weekend or so. So in the meantime, you can email or connect with me. But I do have an offer that we're giving away free books. You just pay for the shipping. So I'll send you a signed copy of my book. And you can get it for the cost of what mail is. But if the site is normally join.googlizationnation.com. It's join.googlizationnation.com. But as I said, I know they're doing some work on it. And last time I checked, it was down. So the other way, when people are, if you want it, just reach out to me on LinkedIn or go up to Googlization Nation.
And to listeners, we have the link to his gift and his social media links on our show notes. You can find the show notes at www.cabineshrblog.com. And don't forget to support our crowdfunding campaign at https://cabineshr.co/crowdfunding. So, Ira, we're coming in with a talk, and you gave us a lot of great value today. But is there anything else you want to talk about as well? Can you give us any wisdom or advice or anything else you want to talk about?
No, please be safe. Adaptability. For people that are whatever role they're in, whatever stage of their life, whether you're recent grad, you're in school now and you're looking at your jobs ahead, or you've got a good job. adaptability has been identified by a lot of organizations as the #1 in-demand trait. So again, there are ways that you can be more comfortable living in an age of Googlization or an age of uncertainty. And I wish everybody well. If anybody wants to reach me, we talked about how to do that. And please stay safe.
Ira, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason. It's a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for your time as well. Remember to be great.